A bear kept knocking on a man's window. When he opened the door, he couldn't believe it. There are moments in life that defy all reason, times when our ordinary routines collide with the inexplicable, urging us to step through a door we never knew existed. In the dead of a quiet winter morning, Henry Lindell heard a distinct knocking on his window. At first, it seemed like a branch tapping in the wind, but the sound was undeniably purposeful, almost polite. He tiptoed across the living room, heart pounding, and peered outside into the moonlight. He found himself staring straight into the dark eyes of a massive black bear. In that moment, everything in Henry's life changed. Henry Lindell had moved into his grandfather's old cabin in northwestern Montana, just outside the boundaries of Glacier National Park, in hopes of beginning anew. The scars of his recent divorce and the memory of a job he no longer loved weighed him down. He had, for years, found solace in the idea of retreating to the quiet solitude of nature. High pines bordered the cabin, their snow-covered boughs glittering each morning as the sun rose over the jagged peaks in the distance. From the day he set foot inside the cabin, Henry felt the echoes of his grandfather's presence. Threads of old stories and family legends lingered in the rafters, the floorboards, and the fireplace. He recalled how Grandpa Lindell had always spoken of this place as a land of second chances, a place where all living creatures, be they man or beast, could find a fresh start. Henry wasn't entirely sure if he believed that yet, but he held onto those words like a lifeline. The cabin itself was unassuming, a single-level structure with a cozy living space, a small kitchen, one bedroom, and a porch that creaked underfoot. The only true luxury was a wide window offering a grand view of the forest. Henry spent his days sipping coffee by that window, letting the hush of the natural world fill the aching emptiness inside him. He watched for deer or occasionally glimpsed the silent movement of foxes, their russet fur a flicker against the snow. For weeks, he heard nothing but the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant rush of a mountain stream. Each night, under starlight, Henry felt a mixture of awe and melancholy. The unrelenting quiet was both soothing and haunting, granting him time to reflect on how his life had unraveled. The divorce had left him numb. He hadn't seen it coming, or rather, he'd sensed the discord and grown too tired to confront it. One day, he came home to an empty house, no explanation but a note, no chance to heal together. Fleeing to Montana felt like stepping off a stage to wander behind the curtain, away from scrutiny and heartbreak. Now, in solitude, he could either choose to bury his grief or let the wilderness help him reshape it into something else. The first days passed uneventfully, but restlessness tugged at Henry's heart. He desired a hint that something, anything, was about to shift. Perhaps that was why he noticed the strange impressions in the snow one afternoon. They were large paw prints, too big to belong to a dog or a coyote. They led from the edge of the tree line toward the side of the cabin, then vanished behind a drift. He followed them a short distance but lost the trail near a fallen log. A pang of unease mingled with excitement. He was clearly sharing this land with more than birds and deer. That night, he sat reading by the fireplace, lulled by the gentle crackle of burning logs, and lulled, too, by the thought that tomorrow might bring new curiosities. Little did he know, his curiosity would soon be rewarded. The presence of a mysterious visitor was already looming in the woods, watching the single light shining through the cabin window. Outside, the mountain winds whispered through the pines. The faint howling of wolves echoed across the valleys, and beyond the front porch, where the forest pressed close like a silent, ancient guardian, something heavy, warm, and watchful lurked. Henry Lindell, lost in his thoughts and heartbreak, remained blissfully unaware. By the end of that frigid evening, he blew out the lantern and prayed for sleep, not realizing that it had already begun knocking with the gentle paw of a black bear at his very window. Henry woke well before dawn. Though the sun had not yet risen, a silver glow hung in the sky, illuminating the snow outside. He rolled out of bed, stiff from tossing and turning. His dreams were shadowy fragments that slipped through his fingers the moment he opened his eyes. He tried not to think about them, tried not to wonder if they had anything to do with the paw prints he had seen. He put on a thick sweater and padded out into the living area, flicking on the soft overhead light. The cabin, though small, felt cavernous in its stillness, as though each footstep echoed in the corners. He was about to start making coffee when he heard it, an unmistakable knock on the wide window to his left. Henry froze, heart pounding. It wasn't the random click or thunk of a branch shifting in the wind. This was deliberate, a dull, insistent thud, like knuckles rapping on glass. Impossible, he thought. But the noise came again, more urgent this time. Slowly, he turned his head to look at the window. He had left the curtains partially open for the moonlight, and that was when he saw it, a shape, large and hulking, silhouetted against the gray-blue glow outside. He inched closer, pulse thrumming. In the half-light, he could make out coarse black fur, a wide snout, and eyes that caught the faint shimmer of the moon. A bear. An enormous black bear was standing on its hind legs, pressing its paws against the glass. For a moment, Henry's rational mind shut down. Bears didn't just knock on windows, certainly not in the middle of winter, when food was scarce and most of them holed up in dens, hibernating. And yet, here one stood, seemingly curious, or perhaps hungry. Fear and fascination mingled in Henry's chest. He backed away cautiously, unsure of what to do. The bear lowered itself to all fours, gazing up at him through the glass. It did not look aggressive, far from it. If anything, it looked expectant, as if it had come for a specific reason. Henry felt an absurd impulse to speak to it, to say something comforting or questioning. But then, the bear shuffled sideways, sniffing at the window frame. It pawed gently, producing another muffled thump. Common sense screamed at Henry to stay quiet, remain behind locked doors, maybe even scare it away. The park rangers had always warned local residents to keep their distance from wildlife. And yet, Henry couldn't ignore a sensation deep inside him, as if his heart recognized something behind those dark, solemn eyes. He tiptoed to the door, which was a few steps away from the window, and glanced outside. The bear had followed the movement, pivoting its broad head to watch him. In that moment, fear wed with longing. Henry hadn't had a meaningful connection with another living being in months, maybe years. It was crazy to think a bear could provide that, but something about the creature's presence felt oddly comforting. He pressed his ear to the door. The bear exhaled a low, chuffing sound. Slowly, meticulously, Henry cracked the door open just a hair, enough to peer through the gap. The cold morning air rushed in, stinging his cheeks. A black nose nudged closer, steaming breath curling in the frosty air. Henry's hand quivered, but he didn't back away. For a moment, man and bear simply studied each other in stillness. Henry could see flecks of snow on its muzzle, the ragged fur around its ears. The bear made a soft, rumbling noise from deep in its throat. Then, as if content just to have been acknowledged, it turned and lumbered off the porch, disappearing into the pale dawn light. Henry remained at the threshold, heart pounding, breath trembling. He shut the door gently, locked it, and sagged against the frame, every nerve in his body alive, from fear, from surprise, from wonder. His mind was full of a single thought. He couldn't believe it. A bear had knocked on his window, and it seemed like it wanted to see him just as much as he wanted to see it. All day, Henry's mind spun with questions. Had he really experienced what he thought he had? It wasn't a dream. The footprints in the snow remained, a path leading from the woods right up to his porch. He snapped a few photos with his phone as evidence, but even pictures couldn't do justice to the tension and awe he had felt in those moments. He sent one of the photos to his sister, Barbara, who lived in Seattle, along with a brief text, "You won't believe this." Soon, she replied with a flurry of messages, equal parts concerned and intrigued. She urged him to contact the local wildlife authorities or at least mention it to a neighbor. "Better safe than sorry," she wrote. Henry knew she was right in principle, yet he didn't want to sabotage the creature's trust or risk it being relocated, or worse. He decided to wait, to think carefully, and to see if the bear returned. He spent the rest of the day in a haze, scarcely able to focus on mundane tasks. His heart fluttered at every sound outside, the creaking of a branch, the rustle of the wind. Once or twice, he thought he saw a dark shape move through the distant line of trees, but he couldn't be sure. He wondered if he should lay out some food or if that would only invite trouble. The environmental guidelines he had read on the park website were explicit about not feeding wildlife, especially large predators that might become reliant on human assistance. Yet a voice in his heart suggested that this bear was different. That evening, Henry forced himself to work on some long-delayed tasks. He sorted through boxes of old family photos left behind by his grandfather. Memories flooded him, fishing trips, birthdays, and a long-ago day when Grandpa had taught him how to whittle a piece of wood into the shape of a small bird. In nearly every memory, a love for nature and respect for the wilderness shone through. Grandpa had always been a firm believer that animals were far more intelligent and intuitive than most people realized. As night fell, Henry found himself gazing out the window once more, searching for any sign of the bear. He remembered a snippet of advice from his grandfather: "If you ever cross paths with a bear, look into its eyes. They can show you a truth you might not find anywhere else." That notion had felt whimsical at the time, but now, Henry couldn't shrug it off. Before going to bed, he double-checked that the cabin was secure, though he left the curtains partially open. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps part of him hoped the bear would return, knock again, and that he would have the courage to greet it properly. But no visitor came that night. The wind howled, and a fresh snowfall blanketed the evergreens, but the knock he had grown strangely attached to did not stir him from sleep. In his dreams, however, the bear was with him. He saw its solemn eyes, heard its measured breathing. He dreamt he was walking beside it through a forest of ancient trees, which whispered secrets of regeneration and hope. The bear brushed against his side, comforting him in silent companionship. When he awoke, the dream lingered in a swirl of emotions, loneliness, perhaps, but also a spark of something new, something like a promise. He shook off the dream, got up, and reminded himself that bears, by nature, were unpredictable. Despite his unusual encounter, there was no guarantee it would ever happen again. Still, Henry couldn't quell that small flicker in his chest, the spark of longing for another sign, a spark that would soon ignite into something far greater. Perhaps fate would give him more than a casual knock on the window after all. Henry Lindell was about to learn just how profound a bond between man and bear could become. 2 days passed. Each morning, Henry scoured the property, but the only traces of wildlife were deer prints and the faint, meandering paths of rabbits. The tension in his heart, mixed hope and anxiety, found a strange release in his daily chores. He found that manual labor soothed him, splitting logs, shoveling snow, checking for roof leaks. The routine gave his restless mind something to do besides circle endlessly around the question of whether he would see the bear again. Then, just when he was beginning to accept that the visit might have been a fluke, it happened. Late in the afternoon, as dusk gathered behind the mountains, he heard a soft, muffled scratch against the window. It was more tentative this time, like a shy greeting rather than a firm knock. Henry's heart lurched. He set aside his whittling knife. He had been shaping a small wooden bird in memory of his grandfather, and approached the window. There it was. The same dark figure, thick winter fur rippling. It stood on all fours, looking in with an almost inquisitive posture. Henry's chest constricted with excitement and mild apprehension. He reached to the side, turned the latch on the window, and gently pushed it open a crack. A gust of cold air hissed into the cabin. The bear lifted its head, sniffing the air that flowed from inside. Henry found himself whispering, "Hello there," even though it felt surreal to speak to a wild animal. The bear huffed softly, its breath condensing in faint clouds. Its ears twitched at the sound of his voice. Henry noticed a small scratch above the bear's right eye, perhaps a scuffle with another animal, or maybe it had caught itself on a branch. His instincts told him to reach out, to offer some gesture of solace. Taking a chance, maybe a foolhardy one, Henry slid the window open just a little more. He had no desire to fully open it, not without some barrier between him and the bear. But a small gap felt safer. He rummaged behind him on the kitchen counter for something, an apple left over from his lunch. He knew feeding a bear was generally considered a bad practice, but at that moment, his compassion overcame his caution. Carefully, he placed the apple on the windowsill, the cold wind chilling his fingertips. The bear sniffed the air again, drawn to the sweet scent of fruit. Slowly, it stepped forward and craned its neck, jaws parting slightly. In a surprisingly delicate motion, it took the apple in its mouth. A quiet crunch broke the stillness as the bear bit down, juice trickling down its muzzle. Henry let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He was both exhilarated and terrified. After devouring the apple, the bear let out a satisfied rumble. It regarded Henry with those large, curious eyes, and Henry felt that strange resonance again, as though two souls were acknowledging each other in a way beyond words. The bear remained for a few more moments, then turned slowly and ambled away, melting into the deepening twilight. Henry sank onto a chair, trembling with excitement and relief. There was something indescribably profound about sharing such a moment, even if it defied every rule he'd read about wildlife safety. He was aware of how foolish it might seem to feed a black bear near his home, but a part of him was certain that this was more than just a wild animal looking for a meal. It felt purposeful, like a bridge was being built between two wounded hearts, one human, one beast. In the kitchen, Henry placed a hand on his chest, feeling the rapid thud of his heartbeat. He thought about the intangible thread his grandfather had often spoken of, a thread connecting everything living, from the mightiest predator to the most solitary of men. Tonight, Henry had felt that thread tug gently at his spirit. The bear had returned, and in doing so, it had brought with it a gentle promise that neither of them would be alone any longer. The next morning, Henry's mind buzzed with thoughts of the bear. Was he forging some unique bond, or was he simply luring trouble to his doorstep? He felt a mixture of guilt for feeding it and an unshakable joy at the interaction. Remembering Grandpa Lindell's words about respecting nature's boundaries, he questioned whether he had already overstepped them. And yet, a deeper intuition whispered that this connection was meaningful in a way he could not yet articulate. To understand these feelings, Henry decided to delve into his grandfather's old journals. He fetched a dusty trunk from a corner of the cabin, lugged it to the living room, and sorted through the keepsakes inside. Among them were letters, faded photographs, and small leather-bound notebooks. These journals, dating back decades, contained Grandpa Lindell's observations of the wilderness, notes on animal behaviors, and personal reflections on life in Montana's rugged terrain. Henry remembered flipping through them as a child, though he barely comprehended their contents back then. Now, he was determined to find any mention of encounters with bears or insights into a deeper harmony with wildlife. After leafing through pages of hunting logs, fishing notes, and sketches of birds, he finally stumbled upon a passage that stopped him cold. June 18, 1979. I've noticed a black bear loitering near the cabin, rummaging through the fallen fruit. She is cautious but not entirely fearful. Saw her again at dawn, peeking through the trees. She seemed to sense me watching. I remember my father once telling me that when a bear comes around, it might be a sign, an invitation to look inward. I felt a tug in my heart since her visits began, as though she's reminding me to face something in myself. Henry read those words again and again. They mirrored his current situation so closely it sent a chill through him. A sign, Grandpa had said, an invitation to look inward. Was that what Henry was experiencing now? The bear's knocking felt like a call to open more than just the physical door of his cabin, but also some invisible door into his spirit, long shut by grief and disappointment. Continuing his search, Henry discovered more entries detailing his grandfather's observations of local wildlife. Some were practical notes on deer migration, while others were deeply philosophical musings on humanity's connection to nature. One entry read, I believe the forest speaks in a language beyond words. In the dark eyes of a bear, you can see both the wildness of the land and the quiet reflection of your own soul. Henry set the journal aside, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. He thought of how he'd never fully appreciated this wisdom when his grandfather was alive. It took years and heartbreak, plus a literal knock at his window, for him to be ready to receive it. Now, he felt an inexplicable gratitude. The bear's visits, however unorthodox, appeared to be guiding him toward reconciliation with parts of his past and himself. That evening, he returned to the porch, sitting on the steps as the sun dipped below the tall pines. The day's warmth fled quickly, leaving a sharp chill in the air. Henry gazed at the forest's edge, half wishing, half dreading that the bear would appear. By now, a subtle shift had occurred within him. He was no longer just waiting for another knock, he was waiting for an understanding. A connection that bridged the gap between man and nature and between one wounded soul and another. When the moon rose high, Henry wrapped his coat tighter around him and headed back inside. An odd peace came over him as he climbed into bed. He remembered the lessons from the journals and promised himself to follow a path of respect and caution, but also trust. Perhaps tomorrow the bear would visit again. Or perhaps not. Either way, Henry sensed that his life was changing. In the silent hush before sleep, he whispered a soft thank you to the forest beyond his window and felt a warmth bloom in his chest, as if the woods had whispered back in kind. The bear returned early the next morning, just as the sky turned pink with dawn. Henry had been gazing out the window, coffee in hand, half expecting to see movement among the tree trunks. Sure enough, the shape appeared, first as a blur of dark fur, then as a majestic silhouette framed by the glow of sunrise. This time, the bear didn't knock. It simply waited at the edge of the clearing, as if uncertain of its welcome. Henry felt a surge of relief and excitement. Carefully setting his coffee cup down, he pulled on a warm jacket and stepped outside onto the porch. The frigid air nipped at his face, but he barely noticed. His entire being was focused on the creature watching him from a short distance. He took one cautious step forward, then another, mindful not to appear threatening. The bear observed him, nostrils flaring. Henry recalled the notes from the journals: move slowly. Stay calm. Never assume animals perceive intention, Grandpa had written. If your heart is open and your spirit is kind, they'll know. Despite the swirling adrenaline in his veins, Henry tried to radiate calm. Then he did something bold. He knelt to the ground, scooped up a handful of snow, and spread it aside to reveal a patch of dormant grass. He wasn't sure why he did this, perhaps an instinct to show he wasn't hiding anything. The bear padded closer, sniffing at the exposed ground. It let out a low rumble, almost a grunt, and turned its head to fix Henry with a solemn gaze. Slowly, Henry produced another small apple from his jacket pocket. Without tossing it, he gently placed it on the snow and backed away. The bear eyed the offering, shuffled forward, and picked it up. The crunch of fruit echoed in the crisp morning air. Henry felt an unexpected wave of emotion, something like gratitude mixed with wonder. Over the next several minutes, man and bear lingered in that clearing, separated by just a few yards of frosty ground. Henry kept his voice low, speaking comforting words. He wasn't sure the bear understood, yet the creature displayed no aggression, only a cautious curiosity. At one point, it began to circle him, sniffing at the air. Henry's heart pounded, but he remembered to stand still, to let the bear decide the boundaries of this strange communion. To Henry's amazement, the bear eventually came close enough that he could see each individual hair around its muzzle and the texture of its black nose. Henry resisted the impulse to reach out. He knew the risk, even the friendliest wild animal remained unpredictable. Yet, he also sensed a quiet companionship, as if both of them were battered by life in different ways and had found a momentary refuge in each other. Eventually, as the sun rose higher, the bear made a soft huffing sound. It trudged back toward the tree line. Henry followed a few steps, unwilling to let the moment end but also understanding he had to respect the bear's space. At the edge of the clearing, the bear paused, turned around, and gave Henry one last long look. Then, it melted into the shadows, leaving behind only footprints in the new snow. Henry stood there, breath hanging in the still air, heart vibrating with awe. He had just formed some tenuous connection with a creature few people ever encounter beyond tourist sightings or quick glimpses. This bond felt fragile, like a winter branch that could snap with the slightest tension, yet it was undeniably real. And for the first time in a long while, Henry felt truly alive. Walking back to the cabin, he thought about how this meeting was not just about forging trust with a wild animal. It was a mirror reflecting his own journey toward trusting himself again after so much emotional turmoil. In allowing the bear to approach, Henry had also taken a step toward opening his heart to life once more. Inside the cabin, he closed the door behind him, but not the door of his spirit. That one, for better or worse, he would leave wide open. The following week was a whirlwind of revelations and challenges. The bear continued to appear near the clearing, sometimes knocking softly on the cabin window, other times waiting at the tree line. Henry, determined to keep their relationship respectful, gradually introduced small gestures of trust, sometimes a piece of fruit, other times just quiet coexistence on the porch. He spoke to the bear in gentle tones, describing the day's weather or recounting stories he recalled from his grandfather's journals. However, a dose of reality soon intruded. One morning, while picking up supplies from a small general store in the nearest town, Henry overheard two locals discussing a series of bear sightings near the outskirts of the area. One man grumbled about how dangerous it was. "Someone's going to get mauled if we don't deal with it." Henry's pulse sped up. He kept his face neutral, but anxiety gnawed at him. He feared that if word got out about a bear repeatedly approaching a cabin, wildlife officials might intervene, or worse. That afternoon, as if conjured by Henry's worries, a park ranger truck pulled into the cabin's driveway. A woman with a stern yet not unfriendly demeanor stepped out, introducing herself as Ranger Elizabeth Carter. She explained that locals had reported a bear wandering too close to residential properties. She wanted to ensure Henry was safe and to remind him of guidelines about interacting with wildlife. Henry stifled his pounding heart, trying to appear calm. He admitted he had seen a bear a few times but feigned ignorance about feeding it. "It came by, but I didn't leave anything out," he claimed, hoping to protect his new friend from forced relocation. Ranger Carter nodded, her gaze carefully assessing his expression. "We're on alert this season," she said. "Food is scarcer than usual, and bears might be compelled to roam in search of sustenance. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, but please be cautious. If the bear becomes habituated to human contact, it might lose its natural fear, and that can lead to dangerous situations." He swallowed hard. The ranger's words struck home. Despite the mystical connection he felt, he couldn't ignore the possibility of endangering both the bear and himself by encouraging it. Still, he nodded politely, promising to stay vigilant. After she left, guilt festered inside him. He wondered if he was selfishly clinging to this bond at the bear's expense. That evening, as though sensing Henry's turmoil, the bear showed up once more. Snow drifted in delicate flurries around them. Henry stood on the porch, arms folded. For the first time, he hesitated to offer any food. The bear ambled closer, paused, and tilted its head. Its eyes seemed to reflect a question. "What's wrong?" With a conflicted sigh, Henry spoke aloud, as if the bear could understand. "I'm worried," he said. "Maybe I shouldn't be feeding you at all. It's not safe for you or me." The bear let out a low rumble, stepping forward. Henry's heart lurched. He knelt slowly, reaching out a trembling hand. He wasn't sure what he intended by this, only that he felt a desperate need to reassure the creature that their connection was deeper than mere appetite. For a moment, the bear pressed its nose into Henry's outstretched palm, huffing softly. Henry could feel the warm breath against his skin, the rough texture of the bear's muzzle. He fought back tears at the sheer intimacy of the moment. Then, with deliberate gentleness, the bear withdrew. It turned toward the woods, glancing back once as if to invite Henry along. But Henry stayed rooted on the porch, consumed by the weight of responsibility. He knew he had a decision to make. If he continued down this path, he risked everything: the bear's safety, the tenuous acceptance of the local community, and possibly his own life. But walking away from this extraordinary bond felt like a betrayal, both to the bear and to himself. For so long, he had shut off his capacity for genuine connection, only to find it now with a creature of the wild. As the bear vanished into the swirling snow, Henry remained kneeling on the porch, turmoil swirling in his mind. In forging this bond, he had unlocked something in his soul. Yet every key has its price. In the depths of Montana's winter, with the forest silent around him, Henry realized that if he wanted to protect what he loved, he might have to let it go. Henry wrestled with his conscience for days. The guilt of endangering the bear vied with the profound healing and connection he felt from their encounters. Each morning, he woke early to scan the tree line, both hoping and fearing another visit. Ranger Carter's warning lingered in his mind. He knew that a habituated bear stood a higher chance of being euthanized if it ventured too close to other homes or became bold around humans. One frigid evening, the decision became urgent. Henry was inside, half listening to the crackle of the fire, when he heard frantic scratching at the door. He rushed to check, heart hammering. There stood the black bear, breathing in rough, labored pants, streaked with fresh blood around its front paw. Shock stabbed through Henry's chest. Carefully, he cracked the door, scanning the immediate area for any threats. Then he focused on the injured animal. The bear held its paw awkwardly, as if in pain. Acting on pure instinct, Henry hurried to gather his limited first aid supplies. He had no illusions of being a veterinarian, but the sight of blood spattered across the porch spurred him to action. Without thinking about danger, he stepped out, only to find the bear had collapsed against the cabin wall, eyes blinking in distress. Henry felt panic rising. He had no idea how to treat a wounded bear, but turning it away was unthinkable. He approached slowly, whispering soothing nonsense, letting the bear see his hands. When he reached its side, he noticed the paw had a gash, likely from a trap or a sharp piece of metal. His stomach churned at the thought of a bear trap still lurking somewhere in the woods. Gently, he bent to examine the injury. The bear let out a soft growl, more of pain than aggression, but didn't pull away. Henry dabbed the wound with antiseptic wipes, apologizing under his breath each time the bear flinched. As he worked, tears of empathy welled in his eyes. He recalled the feeling of being wounded, maybe not physically, but emotionally, left to bleed out, unseen. Meeting the bear's gaze, he saw a vulnerability that bridged any divide between species. The bear trusted him enough to seek help in its moment of pain. That trust sent a surge of protective resolve through Henry. He would do whatever he could to help. The process was agonizingly slow. Henry's fumbling attempts to bandage the paw were clumsy at best, but the bear tolerated it. After finishing, he lingered, stroking the bear's thick fur. The beast shivered, perhaps from cold or shock. Henry made a snap decision: he couldn't leave it outside to freeze. Risking every rule of wildlife interaction, he coaxed the bear around to the sheltered side of the porch, where an old storage area provided partial cover from the wind. He dragged out some extra blankets, layering them to create a makeshift bed. The bear settled there, grumbling quietly. Henry stayed close, occasionally checking the bandage and murmuring words of encouragement. In the early hours, as dawn lightened the sky, the bear began to breathe more steadily. Exhaustion finally overcame Henry. He dozed, sitting upright, a blanket around his shoulders, leaning against the cabin wall while the bear slept only a few feet away. The sheer trust implicit in that arrangement struck him as nothing short of miraculous. When morning came, Henry woke to find the bear upright, testing its weight on the injured paw. Though still tender, it seemed to be improving. Henry's chest filled with relief, but also with the realization that he was in deeper than ever before. He had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. By providing medical aid, by offering refuge, He had bonded himself to the bear in a way that transcended curiosity or mild friendship. They were, in some small measure, family. As the bear cautiously hobbled off toward the forest, Henry whispered, "Be careful, friend." The creature paused, turning to look back at him before vanishing among the snowy pines. Alone again, Henry exhaled shakily. He was grateful the bear lived, yet dread coiled in his stomach. The more entangled he became, the harder it would be to do what might be necessary to let the bear return fully to the wild, away from human dangers and away from him. Henry didn't see the bear for several days after that. A fierce blizzard rolled through the region, blanketing everything in thick drifts of snow. Icy winds rattled the cabin windows, and the temperature plummeted. Henry hunkered down, occasionally losing power, relying on the wood stove for heat and the fireplace for light in the evenings. Yet no matter how severe the storm, his thoughts remained fixed on the bear. He wondered if it had found shelter, if the wound had worsened, or if it was strong enough to ride out nature's fury. In the midst of that storm, Henry experienced something akin to a catharsis. Forced into isolation by the howling weather, he found himself grappling with the ghosts of his past. The cabin's walls felt both stifling and comforting, as though the structure itself was urging him to reflect. Memories of his failed marriage surfaced like shards of ice in his mind, moments of tenderness overshadowed by unspoken resentments. He recalled nights he came home late, too consumed by work stress to notice the quiet sorrow in his wife's eyes. Then came the day she left, and the letter she scrawled, apologizing for not having the strength to keep pretending. Henry had buried those memories under anger and pain. Now, as the wind howled, he finally let himself mourn what was lost. In this internal landscape of regret, he found renewed empathy for the wounded bear. The creature had found a measure of healing in Henry's care. Was it possible that Henry, too, could heal his own wounds by tending to another's? The idea gave him hope, a slender thread in the frigid darkness. When the blizzard finally subsided, Henry ventured outside, trudging through knee-deep drifts to clear a path for the car. He doubted he'd be driving anywhere soon, but the physical labor felt grounding. His eyes continuously scanned the tree line for a flicker of movement. Nothing, at least not until he heard a sound behind him. A low, hesitant rumble. He spun around and spotted the bear standing atop a small rise, its fur dusted with snow, the bandaged paw still evident but less blood-stained than before. Relief crashed over Henry like a tidal wave. He set down the shovel, raising his hand in greeting. The bear ambled closer, favoring the injured leg. Henry could tell the blizzard hadn't been kind to the creature, its fur looked matted, and its steps were slow, but it was alive. Impulsively, Henry closed the distance between them, stopping within a few feet. He placed his gloved hand gently on the bear's flank, feeling the rough, wet fur beneath his palm. The bear flinched slightly, then allowed the touch. "You made it," Henry murmured, his voice thick with emotion. The bear sighed, almost wearily, and settled onto its haunches. Henry crouched beside it, ignoring the cold seeping through his boots. He examined the makeshift bandage, which was now tattered. Carefully, he peeled away the ragged cloth, wincing at the raw edges of the wound. The bleeding had stopped, but it clearly needed further cleaning. This time, Henry had a plan. He guided the bear toward the sheltered porch again. Over the next hour, he used warm water to gently wash the injury, applied antibiotic ointment from his first aid kit, and rebandaged it with cleaner strips of fabric. The bear didn't resist, only tensed and whimpered softly at each sting. Henry spoke soothing words, feeling an ache in his chest, for its pain, but also for the silent knowledge that he couldn't keep doing this forever. After finishing, he sat back against the cabin wall, exhausted. The bear huffed in acknowledgement, then settled on the makeshift bed of blankets Henry had refreshed. For a long time, man and bear sat quietly, letting the winter sunlight glimmer on the fresh snow. Henry was so lost in the moment that he failed to notice another presence until he heard a sharp intake of breath. He turned to see Ranger Carter standing near the edge of the porch, eyes wide with astonishment. She must have approached on foot, perhaps to check on Henry after the storm. Henry's stomach plummeted. There was no hiding the evidence, he was tending to a bear like a pet. Any illusions of plausible deniability vanished in an instant. The ranger's face was a mixture of shock, concern, and a begrudging kind of amazement. Henry got to his feet, hands raised in a conciliatory gesture. "I can explain," he started. But Ranger Carter held up a hand, staring at the bear's bandaged paw. The bear, for its part, only lifted its head to blink at her, then settled back down, too weary to protest. "You treated its wound?" she asked, voice low. Henry nodded, forcing himself to meet her gaze. He explained about the trap, the bear's injury, and how he couldn't bear to let it suffer. As he spoke, he saw conflicting emotions flicker across the ranger's face, relief that the bear was not dangerous at this moment, frustration that Henry had so clearly overstepped guidelines, and a certain wonder at the depth of trust the animal displayed. She sighed. "Henry, you know this is not standard procedure. This could be dangerous for both of you if the bear becomes too dependent on humans." "I know," Henry interrupted, his voice cracking. He paused, drawing a steadying breath. "I know the risks. But it was hurt, I had to do something. Please, don't report it. If you move it or euthanize it, it won't survive." Ranger Carter bit her lip, torn. After a tense moment, she said, "Let me consult with a wildlife rehab specialist. The bear might need professional care, but let's see what they say first. Just stay with it, but keep your distance as much as you can. I'll be back." She cast one last wary glance at the black-furred patient, then retreated into the snowy yard, heading for her truck. Henry's pulse thundered in his ears. He crouched beside the bear again, stroking its flank lightly as it dozed. The storm outside had passed, but a new storm raged in his heart. In caring for the bear, he might have sealed its fate, yet he also felt more alive, more purposeful than he had in years. He closed his eyes, murmuring a silent plea to whatever spirits guided the wilderness. He prayed for the bear's survival and for the courage to face what lay ahead. The hours crawled by after Ranger Carter's departure. Henry stayed by the bear's side, periodically tending its wound with gentle caution. His mind reeled with possibilities. Would the ranger return with a veterinarian? Would they sedate the bear and transport it to a rehabilitation facility? Or would a bureaucratic decision mean this bear, so trusting now, would be deemed too dangerous to remain in the wild? As evening approached, the faint roar of an engine announced Ranger Carter's return. Henry looked up to see her truck crunching over the snow, followed by a second vehicle belonging to a local wildlife rehab organization. Out of the second truck stepped Dr. Naomi Fletcher, a kindly-looking veterinarian with a soft-spoken authority. She carried a medical bag and approached the porch with measured steps. Henry's heart pounded. Dr. Fletcher examined the bear's paw with surprising calm, clearly used to handling injured wildlife. She commended Henry on cleaning the wound but frowned at the mention of how the bear had been seeking refuge on the porch. "This level of human contact is unusual," she said softly, glancing at Henry with a mix of concern and compassion. "We can't just leave this animal in your care indefinitely. It needs to recover in a place that's safe for everyone." Hearing those words, Henry fought a surge of panic. He knelt beside the bear, stroking its shoulder. "But will it be released back into the wild?" he asked. "Or are they going to deem it too habituated?" Dr. Fletcher exchanged a look with Ranger Carter. "If we can rehabilitate it successfully, teach it to fear humans again, then yes, it can return to the wild. But that's a delicate process. It'll require careful isolation and training. We can't have a black bear associating people with food or comfort." Henry swallowed a lump of dread. He understood the logic but hated the thought of the bear feeling abandoned or betrayed. Despite that, he nodded. "I understand. I just want what's best for it." The veterinarian knelt down, speaking soothingly as she prepared a mild sedative. She explained they would transport the bear to a specialized enclosure, give it proper medical attention, and see if it could be safely reintroduced to its natural habitat. The mention of an enclosure made Henry wince. Would the bear feel caged? Confused? Would it think he had forsaken it? When Dr. Fletcher gently administered the sedative, the bear stirred anxiously, letting out a distressed groan. Henry leaned in, murmuring words of comfort. He felt hot tears welling up. This was a heartbreak all its own, like losing a friend just as he'd learned to open himself to love again. Yet he forced himself to remain calm, to be the steady presence the bear needed in its final moments of consciousness on his porch. As the sedative took hold, the bear's eyes fluttered, struggling to focus on Henry. The man placed a trembling hand on the bear's massive shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "For the lessons. For the companionship. For the healing. For knocking on his window and showing him that trust could be reborn." Ranger Carter and Dr. Fletcher helped maneuver the drowsy bear onto a stretcher. They carried it carefully to the wildlife truck, securing it inside. Henry watched, cheeks wet, as the door closed. The bear's face was barely visible through the window, its eyes half-lidded, still searching for Henry, until the sedative fully pulled it under. Before leaving, Dr. Fletcher assured Henry she would keep him updated on the bear's progress. Ranger Carter placed a hand on Henry's shoulder. "I hope you understand, we're doing this to give it the best chance at a normal bear life. I'm sorry it has to be this way." Henry nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He stood by the clearing, watching the truck drive away until it disappeared around the bend. A hollow ache filled his chest. The cabin and the forest behind him felt eerily empty. In a way, it felt as though a piece of his soul had gone with the bear. All he could do now was wait and trust that sometimes letting go was an act of love. Perhaps in that surrender, a new doorway would open, a doorway to hope, to a life where neither man nor bear would forever be chained by pain. With the sky dimming into twilight, Henry walked back to the cabin, the memory of those gentle knocks echoing in the silence. One chapter of this extraordinary saga had closed. The next was about to unfold. Days turned into weeks. Henry received sporadic updates from Dr. Fletcher, each a lifeline for his anxious heart. The bear, she said, was making progress. The paw wound had healed remarkably well. Gradually, it had been moved to a larger enclosure, away from human interaction except for necessary medical checks. The hardest part, she admitted, is reinstating its natural wariness of people. But we have methods, limited contact, negative conditioning around human sense, all designed to retrain the bear to remain wild. Henry struggled with conflicting emotions as he read each message. He wanted the bear to flourish, free in the Montana wilderness. Yet he couldn't quell an ache of longing, a selfish desire to see it again, to share one more moment of that inexplicable bond. His sister, Barbara, phoned often, offering support. "You did the right thing," she reassured him. "You gave that bear a chance, and you found a part of yourself in the process." Henry tried to believe her. In the quiet nights, he still dreamt of the bear walking beside him, leading him through shadowy forests toward an unknown horizon. In these dreams, the bear would turn, meet his gaze, and Henry would feel a profound sense of acceptance, an understanding that some bonds transcend words or logic. One crisp morning, Henry got a call from Dr. Fletcher. She sounded cautiously optimistic. "We're planning to release the bear. I wanted to let you know, if you're interested, you can watch from a safe distance. But no direct contact. We found a spot deep within Glacier National Park that seems ideal, far from human dwellings, plenty of food sources, and near a known bear population. The paw is fully healed, and the bear's behavior indicates it's ready." Henry's heart soared and sank. He was overjoyed to learn the bear would return to its rightful home, but the finality of that release stung. Still, he couldn't imagine not being there, even if only as a distant witness. He thanked Dr. Fletcher, quickly made arrangements, and spent a restless night preparing for the journey. The next day, he drove to the designated rendezvous point, a remote service road within the park, accessible only by four-wheel drive vehicles. Ranger Carter and Dr. Fletcher were already there, along with a small team of wildlife specialists. They greeted Henry with polite smiles, though a hint of concern remained in the ranger's eyes. She understood how emotional this would be for him and also the necessity of maintaining professional boundaries for the bear's sake. The bear arrived sedated, but less heavily this time. Its crate was loaded onto a snowmobile trailer designed to navigate the rugged terrain. Dr. Fletcher explained they would drive to a secluded area, open the crate, and let the bear roam free. Henry would observe from a safe vantage point, ensuring the bear did not associate him with comfort. He agreed, swallowing the knot in his throat. They set off, engines roaring as they traversed winding, snow-packed trails. The pine-laden air was bracing, carrying the scent of wild majesty. Henry remembered the first days he spent in the cabin, lonely, uncertain. Now, stepping into these deep woods with a purpose, he felt a quiet courage guiding him. Eventually, they reached a pristine expanse where tall firs stood silent as sentinels. The specialists prepared the crate, checking the bear one last time, then signaled Henry to keep his distance behind a thick cluster of trees. Henry's breath caught in his chest as they opened the crate. At first, the bear remained still, blinking groggily in the snowy sunlight. Then, step by careful step, it emerged. Its fur gleamed in the wintry rays, the once-injured paw now steady on the ground. The team backed away, giving the bear space. It sniffed the air, ears perked. The wilderness beckoned, a realm of wide-open possibilities, with no more porch or bandages to confine it. In that charged silence, Henry dared to peek around the tree trunks, wishing the bear well in his heart. The bear swung its head, gaze sweeping across the clearing. For one breathless, suspended moment, it seemed to look straight at Henry, even though the distance was too great for certain recognition. Henry's eyes burned with tears, an odd blend of sorrow and joy. Then the bear turned and lumbered forward into the forest, its silhouette merging with the branches and undergrowth until it became one with the wild. A hush followed. Henry felt something expand in his chest, as if a locked door had flown open. Ranger Carter quietly stepped up to him. "You okay?" she asked gently. He nodded, tears tracing a path down his cheeks. "I'm more than okay," he whispered. "I'm better." In that moment, he understood that letting go was not abandonment, it was the purest form of respect and love, honoring the bear's nature and future. He realized, too, that he had found a sense of wholeness he hadn't felt since long before his marriage unraveled. This chapter of his life, this wild, improbable bond, had changed him irrevocably. They all trekked back in relative silence, respectful of the magnitude of what had occurred. Before departing, Dr. Fletcher gave Henry a final nod of reassurance, as if to say, "We did the right thing." Ranger Carter offered him a brief handshake, then Henry climbed into his truck. The engine's rumble was a dull presence under his swirling thoughts as he drove away. Winding through the towering evergreens, he looked at the world with new eyes. Each tree, each sunlit patch of snow, felt rich with meaning. In the rearview mirror, the park receded, but the memory of the bear, its trust, its resilience, its powerful spirit, remained vivid. Henry knew that every so often, maybe on a cold winter morning or a gentle summer dusk, he would think of that knock on the window and the friendship that defied all reason. It was a friendship forged in compassion, tested by adversity, and ultimately freed in an act of unconditional care. And in letting the bear return to the wild, Henry found himself returning to life, no longer shackled by sorrow, but open once again to the mysteries that make this world so achingly beautiful. A new day had dawned for both man and beast. In the end, Henry Lindell discovered that sometimes the greatest acts of love involve letting go. When that black bear first knocked on his window, he never imagined the powerful bond that would grow between them, nor the profound healing he would find in the process. By opening his door and his heart, Henry glimpsed a connection that bridged the chasm between man and nature. Through trials, doubts, and acts of courage, he learned that true companionship does not chain another soul but sets it free. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of trust, resilience, and personal growth. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with friends who might need a reminder of hope, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting and thought-provoking stories. Your support means the world, and we look forward to sharing more amazing narratives with you soon.